Welcome to Heller-Hurwicz Office Hours, the podcast where we feature economists connected with the University of Minnesota and the research that helps us make sense of a complex world. This season, we are continuing our deep dive into how rigorous economic research informs our understanding of the rapidly shifting global landscape. Today, we're tackling one of the biggest economic challenges facing Americans today, the crisis of affordable housing. While interest rates and supply chains dominate the headlines, our guest today argues that there is another driver keeping affordable housing out of reach, not only in the United States, but in most countries throughout the world. We are joined by Jim Schmitz, an economist at the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, who has spent years researching how monopolies shape our economy and the surprising ways they can increase prices, decrease innovation, and even reduce their own potential profit. The views he expresses in our conversation are his own and not those of the Minneapolis Fed. Welcome.
Thank you.
So just to start off, it's a really basic question, but one of the nice things about having a podcast is I get to ask those really basic questions.
Okay.
What does affordable housing really mean? We use that term a lot, but what does it mean?
I would say affordable housing is housing that families, let's say at the 20th percentile of the income distribution, can afford, meaning that it would account for, let's say, 30% or less of their income to get these homes. That's one thing. Okay, but there's more to it.
Okay,
there's
good.
more.
Yeah,
there's
go ahead.
Okay, and the other thing is there are no subsidies involved in people buying these homes. Okay, there's the two things. Now, you may say that sounds crazy because we know that this doesn't happen today for families at 50% of the percentile. But I use that definition because in the 1950s and 1960s, that was exactly what was happening.
We all have this memory that in the 1950s, 1960s, there was more affordable housing, but sometimes memories are false. So that was really true in terms of when we're thinking about that there were periods of U.S. history where the term affordable housing, it was affordable.
No, that was, not in the sense I just described. I'm talking about 20%, the income, the households at the 20 percentile of the income distribution, okay? Affordable housing has been a problem, again, in my notes, since, people talked about in 1850s, okay? And they talked about it till 1950, about housing, affordable housing was a problem. Okay, so I'm going to go to another definition because I just defined affordable housing, okay? And the way people define affordable housing crisis was when there were ways to produce homes that people at the 20th percentile of the income distribution could buy without subsidies, but they weren't produced because of, we can talk about that, okay? But there were methods to produce homes satisfying. So that's what a crisis is. The affordable housing crisis is when there's methods available to meet the needs of these very low-income people, but they're not used, okay? And if I can just I'm just going to quote somebody from 1850.
Sure.
An economist named William Stanley Jevons. It's somebody I actually discovered recently, but he's a monster in the economics field, but I didn't know how much. But here's what he said. He defined an affordable housing crisis. If then the operatives of the building trades gain, it is at the expense mainly of their fellow countrymen who are retained in wretched, unhealthy dwellings, unworthy of the 19th century, okay? So again, we know housing can't be great in the 19th century, but what's going on is there are ways to make houses, that we could make houses that, he calls them, unfit for the 19th century, okay? So I just want to make the point, there's been an affordable housing crisis. This was written in 1868. but people wrote about affordable housing crises throughout, 19th century and then, first half of the 20th century. So we have had affordable housing crises our whole entire, I'll just stop. I mean, but again, we were able to get around that crisis for 20 years in the 1850s and 1860s. And it was by, using methods that were available and are available now.
And this is essentially, making the leap. So we're talking about manufactured housing. I mean, using the techniques of the factory.
Yeah, and that's what, and when people talked about affordable housing crisis back in the 1900, 1950, that's what they talked about. We are having affordable housing crises because we are using technologies that are hundreds and hundreds of years old that require very skilled workers. Okay. And so here you go. I mean, that's what they said. Not only just like random people. I mean, very famous, very important people were saying this. Okay. And let me just make the last point. I mean, we're going to get to that. It's like, well, why weren't they using this technology?
Before we get to that question, which is really important, that is actually critically important. In reading some of your papers, there was a period of time in U.S. history where manufactured housing actually was a much larger percentage of the housing stock than I ever even imagined.
Yes, it was. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. In the 1950s and 1960s, we were making homes in factories and making them incredibly cheap. The other thing is you can make them incredibly small. Okay? All right? We don't have to, usually in a stick-built environment outside, you don't, they were making homes small so low-income people could buy them. So, but Chris, it was a 33% share of single-family production, but it was increasing and convex, right? Convex meaning it's going like this. Like
keeps going up.
Yeah, at an increasing rate.
Okay.
Meaning, convex is like, a straight line would be like that. This is like, it's every year it's going up and up. And, so who knows where the share was going to.
But this is a history that's largely unknown or largely ignored. I don't know whether it's unknown or ignored, which is the right term. But when I read your paper, it was like, and I think I follow economics pretty closely. I was not aware of this share of the market that was rapidly growing.
Well, I don't want to say bad things about my profession, but after economists basically weren't even aware of factory homes until recently, okay? They just forgot about it. So here you have people in 1945 talking about factory homes of the future, and then a few years later, they're not even talked about. There's some big problems there. Anyway, that's another topic. But let me just say, but back to your point, this history should be widely known. It's an incredible, incredible story. And the people the leaders of this industry knew exactly what they do. They knew how to reduce costs. And one way was to build, they were able to develop building codes that were common across the country. And so you had 600 factories building these things, okay? And what happens then is there's something called directed technological change, which is a huge thing. And it was written, at my notes, the University of Minnesota economists are all over this thing. Because Jacob Schmuckler was an economist in the 50s writing about directed technological change here, like in Minnesota. And so what happens is when you have 600 factories making a product, if a supplier is able to make an innovation that all these factories can use, it's a massive profit gain, right?
Yeah.
So these leaders of this industry knew this. And not only did they know this, they reached out to the suppliers and they said, look what we have here. Look at the amount of money you can make. they brought the suppliers into their trade association in a formal way. They didn't have all the power, but they brought them in. And they said, look, this is what we're doing. These are the building codes we're making. Can we make these building codes different so it'll be easier for you to make inputs? So this is an incredible story.
It is an incredible story. Okay, so what brought it to a halt is because if you mention to people manufacturing homes, mobile homes, they'll talk about some mobile parks, often on the outskirts of a town, and a very different story from what you're describing. So what brought it to a halt?
Before we get there, can I just say, I just want to talk about, all these people talking about affordable housing crises, from Jevons to the people in the 1900s. They knew why these technologies that are available weren't being used. And it's one word: monopoly or monopolies, okay? And not monopolies, by the way, we think about them like a firm that is a single seller with very few substitutes. I mean, that's a silly way to think about it. I mean, our great forebears from Adam Smith through 1950, they knew all types of organizations become monopolies. They do all sorts of things. So the reason we had affordable housing crises from 1860 to 1950 was because monopolies would block any attempts at making factory housing. Okay? So again, let me go. I'm sorry to take up all the time here, but let me go back to William Stanley Jevons 1 second. In 1868, this is what he said. I mean, he gives you sort of a preview. He goes, at the late social science meeting, it was stated that attempts had been made to lower the cost of erecting workmen's dwellings and lodging houses, and thus improve the condition by employing bricks of a larger size than usual. The insuperable difficulty was at once encountered that no bricklayers could be found who would set such bricks. Okay, so I mean, I'm not sure they were unions. Okay, so this is like, that's what's going on. And so now I want to get to. Okay, so now I'm back to your question. What happened in 1970, right, to stop it? Okay,
What stopped it?
Okay. I told a little bit of a lie, because I'm going to say, well, how did they ever get to such levels of production, the manufactured housing? If monopolies were always crushing new technologies, how did they ever get to where they were? Well, this is another part of the crazy. Monopolies were very worried about the manufactured housing. They were very worried, and they came, well, I'll make it short. They hit upon a great idea. We're going to say these houses are not even houses; they're cars, okay, or trailers. So they're not even really part of the housing industry. They can't be anywhere where there's traditional housing or any kind of housing. So we're going to send them out to Siberia.
You didn't want them in your single family home neighborhood.
Yeah, and way out. So in some sense, that's how they escaped. That's how they escaped the monopolies. It backfired. They sent them away thinking they were gone. But then you have these leaders saying, oh, we're out here in the middle of nowhere. We can make building codes the way we want to. And on and on. Okay, so that is why they were able to escape monopolies. Now, what happened in the early 70s? I mean, the traditional builders obviously saw that they were going to, most of the industry is just going to go away. And so they actually got subsidies from HUD. They were giving subsidies to people. If you bought a stick-built home, you got a 1% mortgage. Okay, so obviously they couldn't do that because it was breaking the budget. But anyway, the line was staying alive with 235. 235 was the section of the Housing Act. Okay, but this was not going to work. So, all right. So what they did is they came up with a building code. The HUD said, and the National Association of Builders said, all right, this is great. You guys built state building codes. It would be much better to have a national building code. Okay, so now the manufactured home producers wrote the state building codes. Guess who wrote the federal building code? The National Association of Home Builders. So they put in So they put in a new building code which had many parts, which just raised the cost of housing dramatically. And so basically, that's still going on.
When you use the term monopoly, so this is the home builders, the electricians, the the insulation installers. I mean, how are you using the term monopoly in this discussion?
Thurman Arnold was the he ran the DOJ under I think is FDR the correct Roosevelt, I think, in 1938 to 43, and he came up with a definition of monopoly. People were more general than the one we use now. I'm not even sure where that came from. It came from somebody writing a textbook. But for Arnold, he says a monopoly is an organization that has taken over the market. Now, we could put in the sole seller if you want, has taken over a market and does these things. It blocks substitutes, okay? It blocks innovation from substitutes. Moreover, they lower productivity in their own organization. I mean, these monopolies lower productivity because they fight each other. It's not like I don't like, it's not that I'm only against the substitutes. So suppose me and you are in a monopoly. Well, we want to block the substitutes. But then I'm like, well, Chris, why are you getting as much as you're getting? I'm going to go after you. Okay? And people, and you see, so you see this happen. Productivity goes down. Okay. So Thurman Arnold again, he's not talked, he wouldn't want to be talked about by economists. He didn't think of much of them, but he was just an incredible economist. And he drew many famous economists to work with him at the Justice Department. So I guess I forget where we are. So
it's because a lot of times, like,
oh, you were asking for a definition.
Yeah, a monopoly. Because if you mention monopoly, it's like this is dating myself. Does AT&T have a monopoly over the telecommunications system? But you have a different. This is different what you're talking about because there are builders all over the country, there are electricians all over and they don't belong to the same firm.
Well, just go back and let's go back to when the manufactured homes were introduced. Who was against them? Bankers were against them because they're going to reduce the value of their their expensively built homes. Materials builders were against them because now you're not going to have to need these materials. They're going to be local. I mean, it's a whole array. Oh, building code inspectors are against them, okay? Because you don't need any more building code inspectors. Okay, now building code inspectors, are they a monopoly? Yeah, they're a monopoly, right? They have control of that market, okay? Inspecting homes in a city. And let me just say, by the way, all these things that economists talk about now, like concentration levels, profit levels, these are all silly things for Arnold and all the people like right? What a monopoly is an organization that does certain things. We don't have to know what the concentration level is or what profits are. That's a monopoly. I see what that organization is doing. That's a monopoly, and that's bad. And we're going to go after it. Okay, it's become. We're getting into things, but let me say one more thing. These are observational definitions, right? He looks, as did Adam Smith, and as Turgot, I don't even know, it's the French guys, I don't pronounce it. He was one of the best ever. They look and they see what's happening. And they make their definitions based on their observation, their observational definitions. Okay. And, these are key things. The observational definitions are widely used in natural sciences and so on and so forth. They're not axiomatic. So we used to use definitions like that. Look at Jane Goodall. She goes into the jungle and observes what's happening, and it revolutionizes, chimpanzee research. I mean, there were people, doing technical studies about them or something, but I mean, you observe what's happening, and how in the world are we going to know what a monopoly? I mean, it's sort of laughable when you think about it. If we don't look at them, know what they're doing, how can we ask how harmful are they? We look at how much profits they make. Well, there's free entry into the construction industry, so a lot of people don't make a lot of profits. It doesn't mean they're harming our country because of a trade association, and through the trade associations, they have this power.
Now we leap forward to today. Now there's renewed interest in manufactured housing. There's and there's some movement in Congress, and there's discussions on the state level, and I think it's a lot of it has to do with your research. So what's going on now? There is this sense that manufactured housing is at least one of the keys toward addressing the current affordable housing crisis.
Thank you for that question. And I was thinking you're going to ask that, but I'm going to give a very disappointing answer.
That's okay.
I mean, because I know this legislation is has it passed or not, but and I don't have the quote here, but it's as Adam Smith said when he talked about monopolies, read every piece of legislation with the utmost care. Not that you think they're doing something that might hurt you, but that is their purpose. And they've done this and will continue to do this. So I could go into and look at this legislation and read about manufactured housing and legislation. I could probably say, oh, what's this mean? What's that mean? But it would take me a long time to get down to the bottom of it. And, I do that, but I mean, I'm limited. I want to look at other things too, right?
Right.
Other monopolies, because that's my main game, right? And so, but I talk to a lot of people in the industry all the time, and I'm not sure, people were worried that, this is all going to be a scam. So, again, worried. It wasn't like they had a smoking gun, but so there was something else related to this. Oh, because I do want to talk about current policy, what people think, these policies we're pursuing that I think are, I don't know, they're not going to work. I'm not sure if I'm skipping around here, but is that okay to talk about it like a current policy?
Sure.
Okay, think about upzoning. Let me see if I got these. So upzoning, it's okay, we're going to allow producers to make, to put 2 or 3 houses on a lot instead of one. Okay. And so when you think about upzoning, there's a couple of questions what is the theory? Why is this going to lead to lower housing? And then what is the experience? And what's the explanation? Because the experience is not what people thought. Okay. So if you read these papers on upzoning, I've read them, a lot of them, not all of them, but they don't give a theory for why they think housing costs are going to go down.
So isn't the theory that you have to just increase the supply? So much zoning is single family. Look, we just can't have all this expensive property that is single family homes. So we do triplexes, sixplexes, fourplexes. It's incremental, but at least adds to the supply.
It's not a really good way to think about it, I think, because this is the build baby build, right? So I hear build baby build, I'm thinking, what the hell is that? I mean, what is this idea that we build, and the price of homes is going to go down? We need to know the costs of making those homes, right? That's not even addressed. So build baby build makes no sense. Okay, be at just that level. So let's really go back to your point. So here's my theory why it might lead to lower cost. Okay, so you're putting 2 or 3 houses on a lot instead of one. Now the cost of making each home may go down, right? Because of some kind of returns to scale. Okay. Now the big one you would think is saving on land. So you're in Minneapolis and it costs $300,000 for a fifth of an acre. But now you're putting 3 houses on it. So you've cut that. Everybody pays $100,000, right? So that's beautiful. doesn't. But a lot of studies find it doesn't work that way. Well, first of all, they don't tell you why. I mean, they don't have any theory, so they're not telling. Oh, well, the price of the land went up. What happened to the price of they just look at the prices of the combined. So I don't think I'm off the mark here saying very mixed results. There's not a lot of people find that this upzoning is lowering costs, price of housing. And by the way, this gets to me too. It's not, they're looking for the direction. Oh, did they go down a little bit? It's not like, oh, did they go down like 30% or something, right? So that's another. Okay, but here's my theory. Okay, I'm not sure if there's returns to scale if building 2 instead of 1. But obviously, and people must have talked about this, but not in terms of a theory that they had, but the people who own the land are capturing a lot of the rents. Okay, so you're not really getting a big savings on land because whoever owned that land is getting a savings. Okay, and then go further. Well, if you build 2 or 3 homes on a lot, let's just say this area is becoming more attractive, right? It's become denser. It's becoming exciting. Okay, so that alone may increase the value of the land. Okay, it may be also lead to gentrification. So you have old people moving out and young people with all their money competing for this land. Now, what I just said is who knows? Who knows if that's what stopped? I mean, there's billions of reasons, but, this is so complicated. We all have to be humble. That's another good one.
Well, that is a good one. But so if we're wrapping this up, does manufactured housing actually then make a difference? If we embrace manufactured housing, if we said, look, all the restrictions are gone, you can just do it. Would that make any difference?
Yes.
Why?
A huge difference. Well, first of all, getting rid of zoning. They are still, we talk about zoning of like stick-built homes, right? The zoning that affects the manufactured homes is still crazy, right? You can't be in very few places. But manufactured homes, the rate of price decline in those things was going way down in the 50s and 60s because you were making 600,000 of them, right? If you got rid of if you let the stick builders, the manufactured home guys make their building codes, home price, we get back to, really high levels of production and really, prices declining. Which brings actually, sorry, Chris, one other thing. I didn't talk about the quality of manufactured homes. They were high too. As early as 1963, the National Fire Protection Association became a co-sponsor of these building codes, okay? So, you always hear about these mobile home fires. And of course, maybe the ones built in 51, 52 were terrible. I don't know. But the National Fire Protection Association had signed on to this stuff and was a big supporter. Okay, so it could make a big difference. And who knows? And I'll say one other thing: the reason why, we talk about modular homes, right? The ones that are maybe made for Excelsior or whatever, but may cost twice as much. They never do anything because, again, people they don't recognize. You have to reach scale. You're not going to drive costs down unless you're making, 100,000 of these things. So, scale doesn't mean a factory. It doesn't mean your factory's running at full scale. It means you have hundreds of factories doing this. So anyway, I've enjoyed this.
It was great. I really enjoyed it. I really appreciate you taking your time.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
Jim Schmitz is an economist at the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis. Office Hours is a production of Matriarch Digital Media, hosted by me, Chris Farrell, executive producer, Twyla Dang, producer and editor, Beth Gibbs, music by Bob Bradley. A special thank you to Heller-Hurwicz Hannah Fairman and Janine Sorrell. Subscribe to Heller-Hurwicz Office Hours to hear about the economic research being done at the University of Minnesota. And to learn more about the research we discussed today, visit hhei at umn.edu. Thanks for listening.